Welcome to Region 6 MTSS Summer Conference. Thank you for joining us for We Have Data Now What? Presented by Amberly Colby, a district testing coordinator from Navasota ISD. My name is Susan Brown, and I am part of the Region 6 Centers team. I will serve as your moderator for this presentation. Next, be sure to participate in the interactive features provided within the platform. You can post questions during the presentation, and I will ask Amberly to respond at the end of this presentation. In addition, you can vote questions to the top of the list by clicking the up arrow to the right of the question. Finally, we have social media sharing provided within this platform. Use hashtag ESC6 MTSS21 and follow the conference conversation. If you need help or technical assistance, you can visit the help desk indicated by the question in the side navigation menu. Without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce Amberly Colby.
Thank you, Susan. Hi, everyone. Like Susan said, my name is Amberly Colby, and I am the District Testing Coordinator in Navasota. A little bit about my educational career. I first started actually in Navasota teaching at the junior high. I taught 6th, 7th, and 8th grade math is where I began. I then moved down to the elementary level, went to an elementary school in Navasota, High Point Elementary, where I taught 3rd grade. I was a self-contained teacher in 3rd grade. Then I had the opportunity to move to a smaller school district, Anderson-Shiro, actually, not too far from Navasota, where I was a 2nd grade teacher, a 3rd grade teacher. I taught 5th grade. And then I eventually moved up to the elementary counselor position there. Did all kinds of things in a small school district that you would expect a counselor, any administrator to do, wear many hats, gained a lot of knowledge while in that position. And then I had the opportunity to move where I am currently in Navasota as the district testing coordinator. So a little bit about my background and how I got to be where I am today. And I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. And you should see my presentation. We have data, now what? And so I'm just going to jump right in. A little bit about this presentation. So I know we all have different platforms that we collect data on. Some of them are going to be consistent through all districts. We all have STAR data, we all have EOC data, we all have TELPAS data. And then some of them, then it starts branching out, right? Like, so some of us may share common benchmark assessments across districts, or we may use the interim assessments provided through ETS, going to be Cambium. And then we get down to our unit assessments, our universal screeners, which can vary a lot throughout the districts. And so a little bit of what I'm going to talk about today is an overall view of what we do specifically in Navasota with our data, but also give you some ideas and some tools of what we have done specifically that you can generalize to fit whatever data, whatever assessments, whatever tools you utilize in your district. Let's see here. So just kind of what I was talking about, just kind of curious what kind of data you collect throughout your school district and what data you collect throughout the year. So for us, we do unit tests. A little bit about Navasota. We have common unit tests in each grade level for each subject. We do collect formative data that can vary greatly between the teachers and the campuses. We do have common benchmark tests. So all grade levels, all subjects take the common benchmark test. We do universal screeners, as I'm sure all districts do. The one that I'm going to talk about the most today, we use NWEA MAP, and that is something, and I'll get more into it later in the presentation, but we have found that this one universal screener, NWEA MAP, has been able to satisfy a lot of our needs with this one test. And so, like I said, I'll talk about that further. You may use TPRI, Texkia, CLI, different universal screeners out there, but some of the things we're going to talk about with MAP that we do with MAP, you can still apply to whatever universal screener you may use or have in your district. Of course, we all collect STAR and EOC data. Teachers have quizzes that they create, individualized for their classroom. And so there's just a wide variety of data out there. It's kind of hard whenever you sit down with teachers on a campus in a PLC and you say, okay, bring your data. And if that's all you say, that can be very hard to come together and have meaningful discussions when you're not being very specific, right? So a lot of what we've done here in Navasota, or a lot of what I've tried to do, is really kind of structure up and streamline our process with what we do with the data that we do have. Sorry. There we go. So I'm sure I have some district leaders, some campus leaders, probably some teachers in this session. But as a leader, you're here for a reason, and that's because you're a leader, whether if it's for your whole district or if it's specific to your campus, but you're here because you're a leader. And so think about what kind of data you want your teachers, you want your campus to collect. And now's really the time to be focusing in on that and figuring out, okay, I'm going to structure and I'm going to make a plan, and I'm going to make sure that my plan of what we're going to do and how we're going to do it is clear at the beginning of the school year. Now, some teachers, like I said just a moment ago, they have their quick checks or their formative assessments or their exit ticket out the door. They're going to have their own things that they use to further their teaching environment. But we do have things that we want to make almost a non-negotiable that we're going to look at and that we really focus in on collectively together. And so for Navasota, we start big with STAR and EOC because that's what everyone has. We make sure that we also look at our NWEA MAP data. Then we break it down. We look at our benchmark data that we give twice a year. We give fall and spring benchmarks, as I'm sure most of you do. And then we'll break it down even further and look at our unit test data. And so when you're at the campus level and you're visiting with teachers at the beginning of the school year and talking about expectations for different things, and I'm sure data digs are probably not at the top of the priority list at the beginning of school, but we do need to set those expectations, and we just need to let teachers know when they come to a PLC or when they come together in that environment to look at data, they need to know what is going to be required, because we can't just generally say, hey, bring your data with you and we're going to look at your data. We want to make it a very structured environment for them, at least in the beginning, to make sure we're looking at the things that are going to give us the most bang for our buck. And so, yes, they need to bring their data, but in what format? Do you use DMAG? Do you use Eduphoria? Is there a certain report to pull? If I ask my teachers to bring NWEA MAP, is there a certain report that I want us all to look at and to focus in on something? So they need to know what kind of data and what format to bring. You need to think about if you're going to have question stems or data sheets. And I'll show you in a little bit some question stems, some data sheets that I've actually created to start that process, kind of like a fill in the blank type of a data sheet just to get that process started. Some of you may have data binders. Not all of our campuses do. Our junior high they do have data binders on all of their students. And data binders can be a great thing. You have to really have the buy-in from the teachers and not make it just one more thing. With all of these things, it can't just be, it's just one more thing to do, one more checkbox that I've just got to make sure that I satisfy the requirement of my campus principal. It's got to be meaningful, and there's got to be a why behind it. And so hopefully we'll look at some of those whys here in just a moment. Okay, so they know what data to bring, they know which format, they know which reports, they know the idea of what you want them to bring to a data dig session or a PLC session. And so there's kind of two different routes to go with your data. The first route that we'll get into in just a moment is looking at the data and thinking, what does this data say about my teaching to this entire group of students? I'm not looking at actual individual responses. I am looking at the data overall. And I want to know what insights, when I look at this and I come to a session, a data session, I want to take away from the end of that session to be able to put something in place tomorrow that I can do to clear up any misconception, or if there's something I can go back and tweak to fix something that I've noticed in the data. I need a takeaway that I can implement tomorrow, but I also need to look at what can I do to improve this lesson the next time I teach it. And that may be in a year, that may be in 2 months, I wrap around, it may be towards a STAR test, but I need to know something overall, what I can do to improve the next time I teach this lesson. And that's going to be your tier 1 focus, right? So that's your overall classroom, more self-reflective on the teacher, your tier 1 focus. And then there's a different way to look at the data, and that's going to be looking at individual student learning. And this is going to be your tier 2, your tier 3 focus. And it's going to be strengths, weaknesses of individual students, instructional materials, gaps in student learnings. What can we do to help individual students in the areas that they struggle? And so that's going to be our tier 2, tier 3 focus. So we're going to kind of break off into these two different umbrellas, if you will. So let's go ahead and look at tier 1 instruction. My teaching to a group of students. And so in Navasota, we are users of Eduphoria. We use Eduphoria quite a bit. And like I've already told you, we've also used NWEA MAP quite a bit. But for this purpose, I'm going to focus on Eduphoria just because we put our STAR data in Eduphoria, we have our benchmark data in Eduphoria, we have our unit test data in Eduphoria. And so all of this data is in Eduphoria. So we can take what you're going to see and what I've done for our teachers and then generalize it to other tests as well. But this is going to look at self-reflecting on what a teacher, how a teacher teaches to the whole group of students. And I like to start big. I like to start with either STAR data or benchmark data. And so I'm just one person here at the district level. We have not quite 3,000 students in the district. We have 3 elementary schools, 1 junior high, 1 high school, and an alternative high school. And so it's not really feasible for me to start with individual unit tests for each teacher. That's why what I've done, I've started with STAR and benchmark data. And actually I started with benchmark data because I've kind of implemented this as the school year went on, and the fall benchmark was the first opportunity that was most convenient for me to be able to help teachers with this. And so I'm going to look at student scores to identify instructional areas of focus for tier 1 curriculum, tier 1 instruction. And then I ask, is there something as a whole that the teacher needs to clarify, explain, or teach differently? And so you can go into a PLC, or you can be a campus leader or an instructional coach, and you can just ask those questions to your audience, to your teachers, and you can have a discussion about it. But what I found was when I did that, you'll have maybe 1 or 2 teachers who they get it and they can lead the conversation, and they're doing great. And they can answer those questions. They can tell you that they have a low TEK, and they can tell you that they need to reteach a certain TEK. When you do that, you're not actively involving all of the PLC community, I find. And so one thing that I did was I actually went in and created a spreadsheet for each teacher for their benchmark, for their fall benchmark. And what I did, I'll pull it up here in just a second. There it is. And so what I did was I pulled this up and I created this for each teacher who took a benchmark test in our district. And so what made it nice was I was leading by example of exactly what I wanted these teachers to look at. And when I did go into a PLC, or when a campus principal, instructional coach led the PLC, everyone was speaking the same language. And because this was the first time that they had looked at their data this way, they weren't having to go out and spend hours and hours and hours getting to this point. It did take quite a lot of work for me to compile all of this and get it pushed out to them. But my purpose in this was to lead by example and give them a starting format that hopefully they could take the exercises that we did together and then put those towards future benchmark tests or unit tests to really focus in on what do they need to look at when they have their data. And so for each teacher, there were 3 tabs. This was a 5th grade math teacher that I chose as an example. I told you my background was math, so a lot of my examples are math because that's just what's comfortable for me. But what I did was I entered all of her students, and I put the score on the benchmark, and then I correlated that to performance on STAR and just color coded it for her so she could have a good idea of if that was a STAR test and those were the same performance levels, where would her students fall? And if you are familiar with Eduphoria, you know Eduphoria does this. I do like to color code it, and I just added it to this spreadsheet. It is nice to have that visual. Sometimes it's not always what we want to see, but it is nice to have that visual. But then what I did on the next tab was I broke it down into all learning standards. And so this is the class view. And so you'll see over here, this is in this elementary 5th grade teacher, there's only one 5th grade math teacher at this particular elementary school. And so the campus 5th grade math scores was also this teacher's 5th grade math scores because there were not, multiple teachers. And so here's all of the students overall, and then it broke it down into subpopulations. And so she had 48 students in her class, 48 5th grade students on that campus who took the math benchmark in the fall. And I listed out every single question. And so what I did was I started looking through here, and I looked for highs, I looked for lows, and things that kind of stood out. And that's what I highlighted red. So if we're looking at this first row on row 4, and I'm going across, I'm not just extremely happy with the percentages. I do see some comparatively higher percentages, but then I come over to my TEK 5.3A and see that we had 29%, okay? I also see that 5.3A was a supporting standard. That's important to note. If I keep coming over, I see another one, 33%. That's significantly lower than the others. So these 3 that I have in red, 5.3A, 5.3E, and 5.4A, were the 3 that really stood out as falling to the bottom below kind of where that natural cutoff was for the other ones. We kind of hung around the 50s, 60s, 70s, and then these 3 were significantly lower. Well, then when you break it down into the sub-pops, you see that every single one of the sub-pops, obviously, if that's going to be the lowest overall, they had issues with that. But then there are also areas of significant weakness amongst the sub-pops and areas of strengths amongst the subpops. So the questions that I asked from this particular tab that I created for these teachers was, let's pull out that 5th grade fall benchmark and let's look at how many questions were tied to these TEKs, right? Because we want to know if it's a TEK that we're going to have numerous 3, 4, 5 questions tied to it, and we are one of the lowest performing standards, lowest performing TEKs. There's got to be something that changes tier 1 instructionally. We have got to do something immediately to correct whatever misconception there is about that TEK. If it's a TEK that maybe there's only one question on the entire test, yes, we want to address it. But if I only have time between a question that's low performing and there are 5 questions on the STAR test versus a low performing test question, TEK that's only one question on the STAR test, well, I'm going to spend a lot more of my focus on the one that has numerous questions, not forgetting about all the TEKs, right? Because we of course have to teach all of the TEKs, but focusing on the ones that are going to give me the greatest return on my investment, so to speak, the return on my time. But this is good because if you have teachers, if I had 2, 3, 4 5th grade math teachers in a PLC, they could possibly have different areas of weakness. Based on their teaching style, based on maybe they were out sick with COVID for a week, the teacher, and so their instruction was left to someone who maybe wasn't familiar with teaching that unit. Just different things come into play. But what's so great about this part is the discussion really opens up, and it's not left to one teacher to kind of monopolize the conversation. It's okay, where do we need to improve here? Where do we need to improve here? Where were some strengths? What did you do over here on this TEK to get 77% pass when this teacher had 30% pass? And that's when the collaboration can really start to happen and really take effect and really synergize that entire data dig and PLC time. And so that was with all of the standards. And then what I did was I actually went into each question. And so this tab has every single question that was on the test, question 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way through. It tells you which TEKs were tied to that question. And then it tells me what percentage of students got the question correct and which percentage of students chose incorrectly for that question. And so, and this is the part that took me a little bit of time, but I think it was very beneficial for the teachers because it really made them focus and ask them a direct question that they had to think about. And so let's take this first question. So question number 1, the correct answer was B, and 77% got it correct. So that's a pretty good, I'm happy with that, especially comparatively speaking. I'm happy with 77%, but I know I can do better. I want to know when I'm looking at this, well, only 2% and 4% picked C and D. Most of them who got it wrong chose A. And so what we're going to do is we're going to get out that benchmark. We're going to look at question number 1, and I need to look and figure out why did they choose question number 1? Why did they choose A? And those are the things that I need to go back and directly fix as tier 1 instruction. Maybe that's a bell ringer, maybe that's a quick review, but there are certain questions that as you go through here, you can say, you know what, I can fix that real fast. I can do something about that to fix that. And so I did try to go through here and really try to give them feedback on each one of their questions. One of them, and this is me being a math teacher, question number 9. This was a griddable question. 58% got it correct. The answer was 103. 42% did not get it correct. If I scroll over, I had another griddable question. Question number 28. Only 35% got it correct. 64% did not get it correct. And so this was a main focus I had as a math teacher. Is the problem that the students don't know how to do the math computation, or do they not know how to grid on a griddable correctly? Because if it's just a matter of they don't know how to grid on a griddable, that's something I can fix as a math teacher and probably get that number flip-flopped and looking a whole lot better with correct responses than incorrect responses if it's a griddable hand entry problem. And so it's just little things like that. And I'm not going to take a whole lot of time going through here, but the point of me showing you this was that I wanted to structure up what they looked at. I wanted to show them which areas of eduphoria they needed to navigate to, and I wanted to give them guiding questions to really ask the questions that are going to get to responses that are going to impact teaching and in the long run impact the students' learning. And so once I did that for the fall benchmarks, I did not do that for the spring benchmarks unless the teacher specifically asked me to. And there were teachers who said, "Hey, I remember you did this in the fall. Can you do this again for me in the spring?" Absolutely, 100%, I will do that for you. And there were some teachers who kind of took this, ran with it, and started doing this for their unit test. But by doing so, it walked them through the process of exactly where to go, exactly how to navigate our platform Eduphoria, and starting to ask themselves the questions to make them better tier 1 teachers. So that's kind of what I wanted to show you with our Eduphoria and our tier 1. Let me get back to my full presentation view. I'll just kind of pause there for a moment, and I don't see any questions coming up, but if there are any questions, just make sure you put those on there, and we will make sure that we do our best to answer any of those questions that you do have. And I will say this too, we have a lot of new teachers coming in, and it's taken me years and years, like a lot of years, multi-digit years, to get pretty proficient with Eduphoria, and I still don't even know everything there is to know about it. And so for a new teacher or a 3-year teacher to come in, just having them know that this is available in the program that we use, and to know that I'm the person that they can ask to help them walk through to really get to the data they're looking for, I think has been a big help, or at least I like to think that it has been in our district. So that's going to be our tier 1, what we're looking at for tier 1 instruction. Now with our data, we can talk about individual student learning, and this is going to focus more on our tier 2 and our tier 3 instruction. And yes, we know tier 2, tier 3 is sometimes complicated, and there's a whole lot that goes into this: identifying students, grouping students, when to pull out, what do we do with students. There's a whole lot that goes into tier 2 and tier 3 RTI, in the RTI process. And so I've mentioned a couple of things about our universal screeners, but the one that I chose to use as an example for this presentation is NWEA MAP. And so I don't know if there are many or if there are any MAP users out there, but a little bit about us, Navasota, is that we do use the universal screener MAP, MAP growth 3 times a year. We also use benchmark and unit assessments. Going back to our Eduphoria, we would look at the student individual responses. So what I showed you before were the question responses, not individual student responses. You can break it down and tell you exactly who little Frank picked on every single question. I just did not include that in the tier 1 look. For our dyslexia screener, this coming year, we are going to use NWEA MAP's dyslexia screener, and we will be using the TextKia beginning of year kindergarten screener because that is required. But kind of focusing on that, we've used that since 2017. That was my first year here. And when we first purchased the program, we didn't really know exactly what we were getting. We just heard, oh, this is great, and you can use it with other things. And there were just a lot of good things said about it. We really didn't have anything. We needed something, and this is what was chosen to be purchased. But no matter what you have, if it's TPRI, if it's CLI, if you use Texkia, the biggest success we have found, and I think it would have been a success with MAP or another program, it's just a continual process of supporting the campuses. And you're going to see that in the next slide. It's just continual support. But whatever test you use, just make sure that the test administrators are trained and that the most conducive testing environment is available. Because if this test is only given 3 times a year, we want to make sure that if that's the data we're using and that's how we're going to group our tier 2, our tier 3 students, it's got to be as accurate, as reliable, and the teachers have to believe in it as much as possible. Otherwise, what good is it really doing? And so spend the time up front to train your test administrators, and to do that training. I do that training every single year, just to make sure that the test administrators, the teachers, are supported. And I put it on the next slide: support, 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 and then support some more. And it's good for me too to be out on campuses. Like I said, I'm here at the district office, but it's good for me to be on campuses and not lose that connection with the teachers, and to see the struggles that they're having, and to be able to really be the one to take making the phone call or sending in a question via email, to take that off of their plate and to let them do their instruction time, to let me help them with that. And it helps me become a better user and a better resource for everyone in the district. So I'm not really going to, let's see what time it is. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about our direction with MAP, but I will say that we started off smaller. We started off 3rd through 8th grade, only tested subjects. In our first year, our second year, middle year, we picked up 2nd grade. The year after that, we picked up kinder and 1st grade. Last year, we added NWEA MAP fluency in lieu of FMP testing. And so it's not something that we just jumped all in and said, this is the end all be all, we're doing it. We kind of baby stepped our way in, and I think that actually helped us build up a good reputation of the program, and know that there was support, and to know that it wasn't going to go anywhere anytime soon. I have on here the Google Shared Drive. Let me show you what I have created in Google Drive. It is a shared drive, and I have a map folder that I share with all teachers who do MAP testing. And this is part of my support. And I'm spending a little bit more time talking about this because part of the assessment cycle is collecting that good data. And part of collecting that good data is making sure, one, they understand the why and what we're going to do with it, but making sure they understand how they can best collect that data. But in this MAP shared folder, I've shared up, we have growth. If I go back, you can see that we have MAP fluency too. I have our MAP roles in the district lined out, but I'm just going to go to MAP growth. And there's kind of 3 parts to administering the test. You have to set up the session, you have to proctor it, and then you have to look at the reports. And so I have steps under each one of these on exactly what they need to do. They have directions they can print off while they're doing it. And then I also do Screencastify's little videos that I put on here walking them through. So I think that's been a big part of helping them feel that support and to feel that they should be confident in administering these tests. Let's see here. Yeah, so we test 3 times a year, like most universal screeners. We do set up classes for interventionists, special ed teachers, pull out teachers, as well as all other teachers. I do training in 3 parts. Actually, really, it's 2 parts. So the setting up sessions and the proctoring sessions I do together. And then I'll go back after the test has been administered and we'll do the report reading, which is what are we doing with our data? But I do this for every single campus, every single year, absolutely beginning of year, and then as needed for any campus, any teacher who needs it after beginning of year. With MAP, there are 2 really kind of reports that I tell them to start with, and you're going to notice a common theme here. We have a class report and we have a student profile report. And this goes back to what I was saying, the 2 different umbrellas. The class report is going to be your overall kind of tier 1 instruction. And then you get down to the individual profile report, looking at individual responses, strengths and weaknesses of individual students. And a little bit of how we use the data. We use it for progress monitoring. It is called MAP growth for a reason. It gives us great growth data. Our special ed teachers love it because class statements are built into the program. They can use exactly the TEKs that a student is working on in their class statements. We use it for grouping for intervention, data for special programs. So not only do we use it for tier 2, tier 3, but we also use this for our GT testing, for our EL learners. We use it quite often in almost every single special ed referral that we submit. We have MAP data. So let's look at the 2 different types of MAP data we have. We have the class reports. And so if you're not familiar with MAP, a lot of these numbers, it's a whole nother session that I could dedicate to explaining what these numbers mean. But just know, for the purpose of the little bit of time that we have together, this is a nationally normed assessment. And so a student who performs smack dab in the average is going to be at the 50th percent. And then so our average performer is going to be between 41 and 60. Those are going to be our on-level, we would say our on-level average students. From there, you can go down to the orange level, the low average. We would consider those like our tier 2 students for the most part, okay? And then when you go down to the red, the lowest percentile up to 21%, we would consider those our tier 3 student learners. And this is really a lot of what we use to group our students into intervention. And so you can understand having that support and making teachers feel like this is valuable, accurate, reliable data is going to get them to buy into really trusting the data and using the data. But it breaks it down for us. So this was actually a reading test that I pulled up. I forget which grade level it was, but it was an elementary reading test that I pulled up. And so you'll see that you have overall performance. It's going to group the students, and then it breaks it down into categories, or what they call goals. And this is another way that you can look at tier 1 instruction. So if you have a large number of tier 2, tier 3 students in a particular category, goal area, that may be something that the teacher is struggling with to teach in their tier 1 instruction. But a quick overview of how we use this. So if we have in the red, I don't know, can you see my cursor, Susan? I don't know. Let me see. Sorry, I'm catching up. Yes, you can see my cursor. Okay. But in the red, it's telling me that I have 3 of my students are what are considered tier 3, performing at a tier 3 level, and only 2 are in my tier 2. Well, that's not really how my campus operates with tier 3 and tier 2. So you have to look at these a little bit differently. And that's the reason I picked this one. Not all of them show up this way. In fact, not a lot of them do. But we do know we have a lot of holes and gaps that we do need to fill. And so if I look in this column, it's called RIT. It orders them from lowest to highest. And so what I would do is I would pick out the 10 lowest, and those would be my tier 3. And then I would go to the next 2 in orange, and that would be my tier 2. And so it orders them from lowest to highest, and I can use that to group my students. This is only one of the many reports that they have. There's actually a better report as the teachers get more familiar with this program that will actually group the students and tell you exactly which students need to go together in smaller groups. But this was one report that I wanted to share. Once they look at that overall view, then they can break it down into individual student views. And this is where we have found this program to be so powerful for us. And I hope whatever program you use, you are able to get, it may not be the same data. You may not have a growth percentage like map growth, but I hope you're able to get some kind of data that you can use similarly to how we use NWEA map growth. So if I'm looking at the student's reading score, and everything is color coded, so it's nice. So I know that their reading is a tier 2. If I look at their math, I see that they're red, so that would be a tier 3 student. And they also took a science test and fell in tier 2. So this student is kind of performing low across the board. One thing that I train teachers to look at, if I see that they're green or they're blue and they're outperforming in all of the subjects except for reading, maybe reading is a tier 2 or a tier 3, well, that could be a signal to me that maybe there is a learning disability in reading because they're showing strength and growth and doing great in other subjects, but reading is the one that's standing out. So this is just a quick way to look at this. But when I see a student performing below average kind of in all of the subjects, I'm not going to jump straight to that conclusion. But I chose this student in particular because one thing MAP shows us, and I love this, it may be a little bit small for you to see, but it gives us a growth percentage and it gives us an achievement percentage for this student compared to that national norm. And so it's telling me their growth percentage is at a 92%, meaning this student compared to other students that look like them with their demographics, with their historical testing data across the nation, this student is performing better than 91, 92% of all the other students who took this test. If I look at the achievement, and it is small, I apologize, they're in the 36th percentile for achievement, meaning they're performing below the average, right? Which is exactly why they got put into the orange tier 2 category, is because they're performing below average. But you know what? Something's going right because they're showing tremendous growth. So whatever that teacher, that intervention teacher, whatever supports are being given to that student, look to be paying off and look to be doing whatever it is that that student needs. So that's one thing that we look at in our data. This is just a screenshot, so it's not an interactive. I'm not on the actual MAP website, so I can't click and take you into these things. But there are instructional areas of focus. And this is where the teachers' minds kind of get blown, because whenever you click on these different categories, and they're listed low to high, so I see that informational concepts would be a weakness for this student because their other categories are higher. If I were to click on this, it would take me directly to TEKS tied to this category that told me exactly what the student needs to work on very specifically. That's why I said special ed teachers love it for class statements. With special ed referrals, it can tell you exactly their instructional level. But even more so, when we get to our tier 2 and tier 3 instruction, it's going to tell that intervention teacher exactly where the student is and what they need to be working on to fill those holes to continue their learning and to build upon the learning that they already have. Excuse me. This little picture down here, I'm going to come back to it, but I just put this in here because what I love about the program that we have, NWEA MAP, is that it shows their data as long as they've been testing in Navasota. So if I'm a 5th grade reading teacher and they took the test when they were in kindergarten in Navasota, and we had the program when they were in kindergarten in Navasota, I would be able to go back and click on those testing events, and it would show me exactly how they performed and would give me all of the data from when they were way back in kindergarten, the touch of a button. So that's been nice and beneficial for us. But here's where I want to get to: what do we do with all of this data? Because no matter what program you're using, it can be overwhelming. And my job is to kind of figure this out and make it understandable for the teachers. These teachers have so much that they're doing. I mean, with reading academies, with incentive allotment, with STAR tests, with discipline, with so many things teachers are juggling. They have to have lesson plans in on time. Looking at data and having to figure out a program and take the time, the hours it takes to figure out a program can be overwhelming. And sometimes it can fall towards the bottom of the stack when more pressing matters are in front of it. And so here's what I did. I did a student data sheet. And no matter what program you use, I was going into PLCs and doing my presentation, and I have a whole little presentation I do with reports and what data we need to look at. And I was finding that I would go beginning of year and then I would go back middle of year. And the teachers were kind of asking me the same questions about how to navigate the program. And so in my mind, I'm thinking, well, I already went over this. And so if you're having to ask me the same question, I don't think I did a very good job, because you're not remembering what the program offers and how to access the data. So what I did was I created it's almost like a fill in the blank data sheet that walks the teachers through step by step of the things I want them to focus on, and kind of takes that guesswork out of it. And so on this particular sheet, I created for MAP, and you can create this for any program that you have, but it really structured up what we need to do when we're in the program. And before I even talk any more about this, I do want to say, when I give this to a teacher, this is for one student and only one subject. And when I give this to teachers, I don't give them more than 3 of these papers at a time. And I think it's important to tell them it's okay when you're starting out and you're learning this to start with 1, 2, maybe 3 students. Start with those 3 students and get the depth, get the understanding, get the knowledge, understand what you should be asking before you start doing it with all of your students. And for me, that was okay. I wanted them to have that depth to be able to generalize to more students, because that's how you're going to chip away little by little to make a bigger impact. But a little bit about this sheet. So they had to put in the student's name, put in if it was math, reading, writing, science, whatever MAP test they took, and what part of the year they took it, beginning, middle, end of year. And I went back and added these little check boxes, RTI 504 EL special ed, just because I would sometimes find that the teachers didn't always know, especially beginning of year. When you get all of these new students, I mean, a junior high teacher can have over 100 students. How are they supposed to know at the beginning of year, which program, if any, a student is in? And so this kind of helped reiterate, and it almost made them go back to remember how to find out if a student was in a special program. So that was beneficial. And then I just set it up. They had to enter in the growth percentile. They had to enter in the achievement percentile. We would have conversations about what those meant. Like if they had a high growth percentage, low achievement, something was working. Just it facilitated the conversations that became meaningful for the for the teachers. I put in here the projected STAR proficiency on MAP. If I go back to the presentation, let me go back to this page right here. So on their growth over time, you'll see, and I apologize if it's so small, but it will tell you how the student is projected to do on the STAR test. The teachers love this. And it's telling me when this student took it at the beginning of year, they were projected to be right at approaches, which is great news. We're passing the test. However, what I wanted them to look at when we were doing our data digs, well, how close were they to falling back down to did not meets, or how close are they to getting to the meets level? How much can we push them? And so let me go back to my sheet. And so I had them check that, and I put that specific question in here. How close or how far away is a student from moving to the next performance standard? It just brought that to the forefront of something that they should be looking at. And then at the bottom of the sheet, we had our instructional areas of focus. And this is all listed in our program, and it could be in your program, or it could be in Eduphoria, or whatever program it is you have decided to use, that list out exactly what you want them to look at. And don't make it too many questions, but we want to know, what area are we going to focus on? When that student has, if they're taking a reading, if I'm looking at a reading map test and their low area is informational concepts, I want to put this on here because when that student gets pulled to a tier 2 or a tier 3 teacher, I want to make sure that that teacher, that intervention teacher, knows that. I have them look for lowest standards. I have them look for any patterns that they may see. The learning statements are given to them in our MAP program, and so they write those in there, so it's right there. They had to copy it. Hopefully it sinks in a little bit more with the teacher of exactly what they need to focus on with that student. And then whenever I do a PLC, I always wrap up with what instructional strategies we'll use and how is it going to look during that small group time? What specifically are you going to do? And this is the part that they interact and get ideas from one another with, is how am I going to actually implement this? But this sheet, like I said, this will take them, they can maybe do 2 sheets like this during a PLC time if we're really getting into the depth of the information. And I am 100% okay with that. And every single PLC I've been into and taken the sheet with me to, the principals and the instructional coaches have been okay with that, because it gets you used to, 1, navigating the program, but 2, it's asking the questions for you and you're having to go find them and put them here. So that's part of the learning process for the teacher as well. So that's been very beneficial for us. And let me go back to my presentation. The student data sheet. Yeah, I think I had a copy in there. So kind of to wrap up, I know we're getting close on time. So to wrap up, oops, I skipped one. Just some closing thoughts. Just know what data, start thinking about now, having a good grasp on what data you're going to want your teachers to look at and to use throughout the year, and just make sure that those expectations are known and that they're clear. Maybe they're posted in a PLC room. Just make sure that that is a clear expectation from the very beginning of the school year. Use class data as a whole to look at and improve tier 1 instruction that's delivered by the teacher. Have the teacher reflect on their practice as a professional. What can they do to improve their tier 1 instruction? And then whatever programs you have that you use for universal screeners, or whatever you use for tier 2 and tier 3 groupings, make sure your teachers have a good firm foundation on where to go to find it, what questions to ask, and how they're going to use it. And this last little part I put in here, it's not as important as to what programs and what tests you may use and have available for you. What matters most is that your leaders, your campus leaders, your district leaders guide, and they teach the teachers what to look at, how to read it, what questions to ask. And again, my big thing is just to support them and make them feel that they can ask the questions and that you're in it with them. And the whole point of this is to make us better at what we do so we can reach and help and intervene more effectively with the students that we do have in our classroom. So I think that's about all I had. I need to check my questions in my chat. Let's see, we're doing pretty good on time, about 11:49. So Susan, are you still there?
I'm still here. Can you hear me?
I can.
Yay. Okay. All right. So I haven't had anybody post any questions. Does anyone have any questions they'd like to share?
I have one that says, will you share these handouts? And so I have to be honest, and I'm just gonna, like I said, just be honest. So I was out last week on vacation, and the deadline for the handouts was due when I was not here. So I missed the deadline for the handouts, but I do have them and I can absolutely share them. I just don't know the best way to do it. And I apologize. That's me missing the deadline. But spending quality family time is important to me too. So I apologize about that. But absolutely, I will share the handouts. I guess I can talk to you afterwards, Susan, about maybe the best way to do that.
Yeah, if you just want to email them to me or Lacey, we'll definitely get them shared out.
Okay. Yes.
Okay. Okay. Well, many thanks to Amberly Colby for giving us the most current research on the data analysis. Before we close, I just want to point your attention to a couple of items. Below, there is a session feedback link with a survey. We would appreciate your help in completing the survey so that we can continue to grow in our practice. And finally, the recording for this session will be added to the presentation session when it becomes available, and the presentation handouts and resources listed under the documents can be downloaded at any time. And so even though they're not there now, they will be there more than likely before the end of day. So if there are no other questions, thank you guys so much for your time, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you, everybody.